Hey everyone, I'm Ron Deal. Welcome to Family Life Blended. You ask, we answer. I'm joined in the Family Life Blended studio here in Little Rock, Arkansas by Gayla Grace.
Good to be here,
It's good to
Ron.
see you. It's really good to see you, especially after you want to tell everybody.
Yeah, I know. I've got this big cast on my arm. I took a fall, Ron. It'll be 2 weeks tomorrow. Pretty significant fall. Had a pretty major break in my right arm that
Mm,
required surgery. Let's see, what did the doctor tell me? 7 pins and a plate that will be in there forever.
wow.
But, you got to be thankful for medicine. They can fix us up when we fall down
Hmm.
and it'll heal. But, the interesting thing is, I really kind of reflected on how things happen in life and the
Hmm.
parallels with blended family life
Hmm.
because we've had some unexpected things happen in our blended family life.
Mm.
I mean, I would have never guessed I was going to take a fall and end up like this right now. And that's exactly what happened in blended family life for us some of the time too. There were
Yeah.
and really there's kind of some themes that I know I've heard from other people. Maybe there's custody changes, there is a difficult relocation that happens, and somehow we still have to learn to pick up and keep
Mm.
going.
Yeah.
And for me, I just have sensed the Lord reminding me, I'm with you. Don't be discouraged. Don't be afraid. I'm walking with you. And I think it's the same thing for blended family life, no matter what people are experiencing.
I think that's a good word. And
Mm,
thank you for that reminder. And I'm so sorry you had to have a
yeah.
difficult,
I know.
painful.
I've been asking God, what are you trying to teach me here? I'm listening, I promise.
Yeah. I could have learned it another way.
Right.
Yeah, haven't you ever said that before? Well, I'm glad you're here,
Thank you.
and we're glad that you are here. This is You Ask, You Answer. So we're going to be tackling some questions that many of you submitted during Blended and Blessed, our live stream this past spring. But we also want you to be able to submit questions right here, right now. So in
Mhm.
the chat, no matter where you're watching, Facebook, YouTube, whatever channel you're on, you can just hit the comment uh, box there and submit a question. And we're going to try to tackle some of those as we go through the time that we have available with us today. So let's start by you just telling us where you're watching from, where you're tuning in from. Give us a city and a state or a country, wherever that is, and maybe how many people you have living in your home, in your blended family. We'll get to know you a little bit as we jump in.
Yeah, and also tag a friend if you know someone maybe who could benefit from this. Tag them right now.
Mm.
They can listen now, or they can also listen later. It'll be recorded, and but that helps people just to understand what we're doing, trying to benefit blended families.
Just so you know where we're going, some of our questions talk about PDA and blended families, adult children and adult stepchildren, forgiving a parent who is unreliable, supporting step parents, what biological parents can do, and much, much more. So we're just going to go ahead and jump in. And I'm not seeing where anybody's from yet, but we're looking for that. If you just joined us, tell us where you're tuning in from.
Florida.
Florida. All right.
Oregon,
Nice.
great. Texas, yes.
Okay, nice to have you with us.
Yes.
That's great. Let's just go ahead and jump in as those begin to hit on the screen. Is there an acceptable amount of time to grieve in a blended family is our first question.
Yeah. Ron, I heard from a stepmom just yesterday who has been in her blended family for 7 years. And she said, I would have never thought this is where we're at. Still 7 years in, relationships aren't really where I want them to be. That's grief.
Yeah.
She's grieving. So I would say no, there's not an acceptable
Right.
amount of time. Everybody's a little different in
Yeah.
their grieving journey.
And, just grief in general. You and I have different
Mhm.
stories, but we are both very familiar with grief.
Right.
And actually, you're experiencing some right now.
Yes, I am.
Back to your broken wrist. Grief is a journey. It is not a destination.
Exactly.
So you never really arrive.
Mhm.
And I kind of think what I see in this question, what I've heard from other people before is our children are grieving, and that seems to be getting in the way of the bonding for us. And so I'm
Right.
frustrated that they're
Mhm.
sort of stuck in their grief.
Mhm. Yeah.
No, you're not stuck in grief. Grief is not a mental illness.
Oh,
It
that's
is not
good.
something you try to get over or you have to resolve. I hate the word, the way we talk about grief, saying or suggesting that somehow we've reached closure. That suggests
Oh.
it's over.
Mhm.
No, it just sort of stays with us. We learn to carry our grief differently. Children and adults learn to carry what they're sad about,
Right.
and that matures. But the sadness and sorrow is still sort of there.
Mhm.
It doesn't always rear its ugly head. Over at time does sort of help decrease the intensity. All of that to say, no, you don't put time limits on it,
Right.
because that's not the way it really
No.
works.
And honestly, I think as it matures, you can begin to be able to hold joy in one hand and grief in the other. You
Yes.
can begin to experience joy again in the midst of your grief. In the very beginning, you can't.
Yeah.
All you feel is grief.
So if you feel like children are grieving and that's sort of holding them back, you got to step into that grief.
Right.
You cannot send messages that say it's time to be done with that, because now you are an unsafe person for them in their grief. That makes
Right.
things harder,
Yeah.
not
much
easier.
harder. Yeah. Let's go to another question. How can I support my husband's ex-wife's relationship with the kids? Is there any way to start building a trust with her? I want her to know I'm here for her.
Okay, lots of layers.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go to saying to her, you will never, the no threat message. I just want you to know that you're the mom and I'm the stepmom, and I will never get in the way of your relationship with your kids.
Right.
That says a lot to that person who may feel some measure of intimidation or threat with your presence in their kids' lives. And that's actually going to make way for the mom to feel the freedom to be the mom.
Right.
Which encourages that, and also makes this whole thing makes you look more respectable.
Yeah. And I mean, it might seem like it's kind of awkward, but it's really a very respectable way to approach that other parent and let them know that you want to respond to their feelings also. I think it can make a big difference.
Yeah. So the second part of the question was, is there any way to start building a trust with her? That's just going to come with time and just slowly moving toward her and gauging her level of openness
if she's ready
toward you. Exactly.
Right.
And so trust is that two-way street. And so it's just going to require both parties being willing to develop that. And then as you experience each other and, okay, she's all right, this is not so bad, then I think trust is going to grow.
And be careful with your expectations. It may take longer than you want,
Yeah.
as we often say about a lot of things in blended family life.
Yep. And by the way, the person who submitted this said, I am for her. That's wonderful. Your heart is in the right place.
Yeah.
And you might even communicate that. That might seem a little strange, but this no threat message is I am for you message. But if you communicate that and you're hoping for a positive response and you don't get it, don't be crushed. Yes, it's sad. There's a part of you that's hurt, but stay with it. Keep going. And it'll be okay. Okay.
Exactly.
Moving on. Next question. How can I encourage my current spouse and their ex-spouse? This is sort of similar to the last question.
Right.
To forgive each other in order to help both homes get along better.
Yeah. Ron, you might remember a story that has come into our Family Life Blended box where a lady told us about their story that her spouse and his former wife, that relationship was so hostile that they had to exchange their kids at the police station. So obviously there was a level of unforgiveness that had gone on there, and she began to see how this was impacting relationships, how it was impacting their child. And I think that's where we have to communicate that this is not only affecting us, it's affecting these kids here. And she began to pray for her spouse, for his ex-spouse, and that he would begin to sense a need to really consider forgiveness.
And if I remember correctly, she, with time, asked her husband to start praying for his ex.
Right.
And that softened his heart. So here's the thing. You lead by example. Encourage that softness. Encourage them to move toward forgiveness. I often say to people, you don't have to forgive today if you just can't. But you can begin to ask the Lord to help you move toward forgiveness today. That you can do. And just incrementally keep moving in that direction.
Yeah. And sometimes it really does require that we ask the Lord to help us. We may not even want to forgive. And yet we know we need to. And we need some help with that sometimes.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. What's next? Oh, okay. So we had somebody from Canada get in touch with us. Says, I've been dating a lady with 5 children, ages 9 to 18, 4 girls. Bio dad is not involved. Girls won't even let him, the man who's dating the woman, let him hug them. How can he build a relationship, and what can he expect? Well, we say all the time, if you're going to try to make a new friend with somebody, What you don't do is crash down their door and barge into their living
Force it.
room and say, "I'm your new best friend. You just don't know it yet."
Right.
That's not going to work. Right. See, it's funny to even say it out loud. You're like, that's ridiculous. Well, okay. So let's just learn from that a little bit. So your job is to gently, gently move at the pace that the children will allow you to move.
Right.
And yeah, no hugs yet. Okay,
Mhm.
buddy. We're hoping for fist bumps. We're hoping for high fives, something that is tolerable for them that they can invest in with you.
Mhm.
And that's going to be the thing that will sort of demonstrate. Let me just say, take that as a metaphor. Those simple little touches physically are also what you're looking for emotionally. Simple little touches, because slowly over time, your prayer is that they will open their heart to you as they come to get to know you and find you more trustworthy in their world and their life. And there's about 1,000 little factors that dictate how quickly that happens
Mhm.
and whether or not it happens. And only some of them have to do with you. That's sort of the bad news, right? There's lots of other factors, but that's the path, right?
Yeah, and I would even say it sounds like maybe the hugs feel threatening to them,
Mm.
and he could even back up and just maybe send a text, begin to consider other ways that he could reach out to the girls. I know in the early years with my stepkids, if I knew that they had an important test or they had a game or something, I would just send a text. Hey,
Mm.
I'm praying for you today, praying that everything goes well. Just wanted you to know. And I just, it's a very small way to touch them emotionally.
Yeah. Before we move on, last thought. It's not a fair process.
Yeah.
You
so
invest,
true.
you send that text. I was thinking about you
Mhm.
had the test go today, checking in, and you get very little back sometimes.
Yeah.
It is not a fair process. You're
Mhm.
not looking for a mature response from an 8-year-old, 12-year-old. They're hurt. There's something going on. There's a lot below the surface. You've
Mhm.
just got to be patient with it and keep going. If there's one thing we know from outcome studies of people who have had successful step-family relationships, when you ask those children who have grown up, what did your step-parent do right and when did it make a difference? What they point to are the little text messages, like
Mhm.
you just said,
Right.
that happened 10 years ago that the child
Right.
didn't respond to openly in that moment.
Yeah.
But over time, there's
Mhm.
sort of this buildup of, okay, I guess
Mhm.
they do like me. They do care about me. And that's what then softens their heart toward you. Long
Yeah.
journey sometimes,
Yes,
but
and
that is the way you get there.
that's the very last part of the question is what can he expect? And I think that
Mm.
is so huge with step parents is we do have to really pull in our expectations and understand that we have to invest without expectations that that's going to be returned. And
Yep.
are we willing to do that?
Yeah.
Because if you're not,
That's
as a
right.
step parent,
That's right.
you're probably not going to make it.
And I just realized they're dating, and that makes a difference.
It does.
If mom's not fully committed to you,
Mm,
why should I bother opening myself? I don't know if you're going to be here tomorrow.
right.
Right. So marriage is going to make a difference.
It is.
Not turn the key and magically open their
Mhm.
heart. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that as long as you're in the dating phase, it's tentative for everyone.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
How do I help my daughter feel welcome and able to look forward to coming to parental exchange time with me and accepting new friends, our new church, and my new home? I'm really struggling. Sounds like the daughter is just sort of not thrilled
Mhm.
about new life,
Mhm.
new
Right.
family, new
Right.
place, and everything that comes with it.
Right. And the comment doesn't say how old the daughter is. If it's a teenager, it's likely that it's even harder.
Yeah.
But even as a young child, I would say ask your daughter,
Mm.
what can I do to help? I
Mm.
so want you to be a part of life here and develop a life here. How can I help you do
Mhm.
that?
Yeah, I think that's good. I also think parents got to remember your son or daughter's chief investment in this world is you.
Mm-hmm.
Not your new partner,
Yes.
not your new home. You're thrilled about the home, love the rooms. Aren't you excited we got a movie room or a game room? No, you're excited about that. Doesn't mean they are excited about it because
Right.
there's so much change, unwanted change wrapped around this new home. So getting them excited about that stuff is going to go through their relationship with you. So focus on them, spend time one-on-one,
Mhm.
invest in, extra time
Absolutely.
and
Mhm.
let it be about them coming to be with you.
Right.
All the other stuff might come along later.
Yeah. Yeah. And be sure that you are really being intentional and investing in that relationship. Ron, we've had a question come in
Oh,
from a viewer. So
great.
a couple of them actually. Let's talk about the first one. What are healthy ways to reduce anger?
Mm.
Healthy ways to reduce anger.
Wish I knew what the anger was about.
I know, me too.
But yeah, there's different kinds of anger. So there's hurt anger, there's frustration anger, and there's sad anger. Now, I say that because anger is a secondary emotion. It is not principally what's going on. So you sort of ask yourself, whether it's you or a child or somebody, are they hurt angry? Okay, if it's hurt, what's the hurt about? What happened? What's something that needs to be repaired or dealt with? If it's sad anger, meaning I'm really just sad. I'm going to make this up. I'm frustrated with stepdad because you're here, but my dad is the one I really want in my life, and he's not here, and so I just show a whole lot of frustration and anger at you, but really what it is sadness. Okay, you got to get them in touch with the biological dad. You got to try to find ways of keeping connection alive to whatever degree you can. The point is, step inside that sadness, and that maybe will help dissipate some of the anger. I'm amazed how many people, even as adults, even myself, anger, that I feel, that I know,
Right.
but I don't know what it's about. And so
Mhm.
there is this, what's underneath this
Mhm.
thing that you sometimes have to chase.
Yeah, and I kind of sense from the question that maybe there's unhealthy ways that anger is being vented, and so we do always want to consider, how are we managing this anger,
Mhm.
and are we talking to other people about it? If we just keep it bottled up inside, it's going to come out. It could be explosive.
Yeah,
So,
there's always pain underneath the anger.
Mhm.
So
Right.
chasing that and trying to understand it for you or somebody else is a good way to at least start into dealing with it.
Yeah, exactly. Here's another one. What are non-threatening ways to talk about finances? Is that finances could be with your current spouse, could be with a former spouse, but yeah, non-threatening ways to talk about finances.
So here's something I've learned to do in my marriage. If it's a sensitive subject and you kind of anticipate that, non-threatening is the key, I think, to this
Right.
question. So I'll walk in and I'll say to my wife, hey, look, I'm a little anxious about this topic that I need to bring up with you. And I'm aware that in the past it's set us off and we've gotten against each other.
Mhm.
And, so I'm a little scared myself. And I'm wondering if this is a topic that's a little intimidating for you. Here it is. Here's the subject. I want to talk about finances. That's the
Mhm.
question.
Mhm.
So how you feel about that, and when's a good time for us to maybe try to regroup and look at that again?
Yeah.
So I lead with, I know this is tender, I know this is sensitive, and I just want to honor that, and I want to honor you, and let's figure out a time and a place that feels right for you, for us to at least start. Now, that is a gentle nudge in the
Mhm.
direction of, we need to have this conversation,
Right.
but it's done with a lot of care.
Yeah. And so, really, you answered the next question, how to start uncomfortable conversations. But I also want to add, in step families, a lot of times what's underneath that is there's some tension between trying to keep things equitable. So,
Mhm.
I maybe want to make sure that money is spent in a way that seems fair to my kids and your kids.
Mhm.
And those are hard subjects to broach. And sometimes you even have to say, I love your kids. I love all of our kids. I want us to figure out how it feels equitable to you also in regards to how we're managing our finances.
Mhm.
Because that it can be a sore subject for step families who have kids from both sides or even just from one side. Maybe
It's good.
maybe one of the parents is feeling like, well, we spent a lot of money on your kids and I'm struggling with that.
Something you said there, I think, is really good, and that's kind of know what your need is before you go into the dialogue.
Right.
And sometimes you can lead with that. Look, I know finances is sort of a hot topic. We have a hard time with it. Here's my need in revisiting this conversation. My need is that we figure out a way to do X.
Right.
I don't want to, make you feel less than, or your kids or whatever.
Right.
I want you to feel honored in every way.
Mhm.
So my need is, you put that out there. My desire is for you to feel honored, for everyone to feel important.
Mhm.
Now, can we talk about money in the checkbook?
Yeah.
Does anybody have a checkbook anymore? I just showed my age. You know what I mean. Where the money goes. Where the money. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
but you lead with the need, and
Mhm.
hopefully it's a need the other person can say, yeah, I have a similar.
Right.
That objective is worth us having the conversation for.
Yeah.
Try to find that.
Yeah.
Middle
But
ground.
finances can be a big deal.
It is.
And those don't just happen within the first 5 years. I mean, when you get up to, as kids are older and there's big expenses and, you got to figure out how to manage it.
So I got to just say, we wrote a book on this.
Yes, you
Smart
did.
Step Family Guide to Financial Planning, and let the book start the dialogue. like, right? Hey, I read
That's
this
good.
chapter. Would you read this? Can we talk about, all of a sudden you're in the conversation with something that's sort of adding some structure
Right.
to
Yeah.
the dialogue.
And you even got questions at the end of those chapters. It
Yeah.
really helps with the dialogue. Okay, here's another one. Is it possible for kids to have different love languages with each parent? Wrote a book on that too, Ron.
Yep,
Talk to us.
that's right. So Building Love Together in Blended Families is the book that I wrote with Gary Chapman about love languages and their applications within blended family contexts. And so the answer is yes. Well, I'm going to qualify that. It may feel like a yes. It's probably a no, but it needs to have a different dialect. Let me explain. Or a different intensity, maybe is another way to say it. So with a biological dad, physical touch kid wants bear hugs and rough and tumble play and all kinds of physical connection. But with a new stepmom or sort of a strained relationship with a stepmom that's in the child's life, they may not be able to do that big bear hug stuff, lay on your lap and watch movies late at night, that kind of thing. But they will let you give a side hug, or they will let you sit beside them, or something that to them is an expression of physical touch, but it doesn't look the same. So you got to take the measure that they are comfortable with and that they're
Yes.
willing
Right.
to connect.
You're watching their cues.
Yep.
It's all about what they're
Yeah.
comfortable
So
with.
that really
Mhm.
looks like, wow, love language, physical touch is not for, well, yes, it is. It's just not yet at the intensity with that other step
Right.
parent.
Yeah. Very well said.
Great questions. Man, keep them coming.
Yes. Okay, here's another one. Let's talk about one of our young adult daughters has chosen an unfavorable path, drugs, hanging around the wrong people. How do we protect her and protect the most vulnerable in our family and maintain a peace in our home? That's a hard one. I mean, the truth is, when young adult kids start making unfavorable decisions, we can't completely protect them.
Yeah.
Yes, I think we do want to be careful that we're trying to protect those in our home. And some of that's going to be with boundary setting, determining what we're willing. You need to have a united front with your spouse. Make sure that everybody is in agreement on how you're dealing with that behavior.
Yeah. The hard part is the word protect.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't want you to protect them, you can't.
No.
And I've lived through this. We had one of our sons who, just went bonkers when he went to college. So here he is, young adult. And what we kept trying to do is connect with him, but be in charge of what was under our control.
Yes.
And then let him know what we would do in response.
Right.
If he were to continue that behavior. So can't control him, can control me, can control my money that he has access to or doesn't have access to. I can control my investment of time and where that goes and whether I need to stay in touch, whether I provide a phone, provide a car, like all kinds of things that I do have charge over. And those are the places where you, say we're not going to support this chaotic behavior.
Exactly. Right.
So you make decisions about how you're going to spend your time. Here's what you can expect from us.
Right. I also want to say it was mentioned about drugs, or alcoholism, perhaps. There is a support group, Al-Anon, that is very good for families who are dealing with those who are struggling with drugs or alcohol. I highly recommend checking out Al-Anon for that. Here's another one that came in from a listener. How do we keep frustration of a situation from becoming a conflict between us?
Well, so my wife and I are doing a whole seminar. We've done it a number of times in a number of different places, but for Family Life, the last 2 years, we've done this called Empowered to Love. And it's really all about emotional regulation when you get frustrated and upset, and how you regulate yourself in those moments. And that, let me just tell you, this is disciple making stuff. Like, I have learned so much about how the brain works and how mind, body, spirit, and relationships and the dance there. I wish we had a lot of time. So let me just sum it up by saying it comes down to self-control.
Right.
And when I get befuddled, that's a clinical term.
Befuddle. Is that a word? Is that in the dictionary?
No, it's not. It should be. It should be. When I get befuddled, which means I am off my rocker, my brain has shut. Literally, the neurology is your brain has shut off the thinking part of your brain. You are now in fight, flight, or freeze. Did you know your brain cannot distinguish between being attacked by a bear and being attacked by your spouse?
No.
It reacts in the exact same way. And when that happens, I have lost self-control. And there are processes and things you can learn to do to stay in charge of yourself, to regain self-control. And I think that's exactly what Jesus expects of me. So the bottom line is you keep things from escalating by managing yourself. And this is so hard. I wish I could just boil it down and say, this is what you do. It's quite a process, but there's hope in it. And so learning to contain your own pain, your own discomfort, your own fear.
Right. And also the stress in your home.
Yeah.
So when stress is high, recognize that it's going to be much harder to have some self-control. And I can talk from experience. The last couple of weeks, I remember being in physical pain and reacting toward my husband in not a kind way, and having to go back and apologize to him. And so that's the other thing I want to say. We're not always self-regulated.
Yes.
And so when it spins out of control, we need to be sure that we go back and we say, that was not an attack against you. That was about what's going on with me. And I'm sorry. Please forgive me. So that's another piece of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep growing, keep changing, keep pursuing Jesus. The more we're like him, the easier it gets.
Exactly. And keep offering grace when situations like that happen.
Another good question. Is there more that's come in?
Not on the screen right now.
Okay.
So let's go to this one. As a new stepmom and second spouse, I feel jealous of my partner's past marriage. I feel like I missed out on all of his first experiences. The truth is, you do miss out.
You do miss out. And so it is a second for him and a first for you.
Right.
You know, I had this conversation with Lori Ferguson Wilbert, podcast number 35. The title is Second Wife, Second Life. Was fantastic.
Yes.
Her perspective about it and how she submits that to the Lord. One of the things she talked about is ultimately there's a fear behind that question, but I'm not getting to experience this with him. Does this take away from our usness, our relationship? Does this cost me anything? And I feel like I'm behind and I'm never really part of it. See, that's just fear sort of building on itself. And take that fear and ask it. Is that the truth? Does he love you or does he not love you? Are you important or are you unimportant? Like you have to confront that fear.
Right.
And I think in a very significant way. And I remember Lori saying she had submitted to God, pray about it, and say, I'm going to live as if I'm still important, even if I feel a little off about this.
Right.
And really good. Recommend that podcast.
Yeah.
Look it up.
You know what else I see this come out is when a couple has a child together and one of the two have already had a child.
Yes.
And so now all of a sudden one of them feels really insecure because this one over here seems to be an expert on everything.
Yeah. One's excited about a poopy diaper.
Yeah.
And the other one's like, oh, another poopy diaper.
Right. And so I think that the one who this is their new experience, they need to come into it with some humility and recognize that the other person does have some experience here. Learn from them. It's a good thing instead of just two naive parents that are clueless. That's how we were in the beginning, right?
That's right. That is absolutely right.
Yeah. So it's a very common denominator, though. It happens. Wow. Here's another subject that we hear about a lot, and it has to do with being an outsider. So what do you do when you struggle with feeling like an outsider to your spouse and your stepchild? This is such a hard place to be, Ron, and yet it's so common for a step parent. And I think for one, you need to express it. You need to express it to your spouse. Make sure that they understand that there's some inside jokes going on here that you're not a part of. That was a life from the past that you're not part of. And so he needs to be the one to say, oh, yeah, when his kids are talking about it, you remember that, Gayla, you weren't part of this, but let me explain it to you. And if
kind of bring you in.
Yes.
Yeah. The biological parent can do that.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. There's always two sides of situations like this. I think that's what the biological parent can do to sort of be sensitive and draw you in.
Right.
But what the step parent has to also do is they have to manage their own fear. Again, this comes down to, I feel like I don't belong. I'm not accepted. I'm not a part of it yet. The dream is not yet reality. However you want to say it, it comes down to discomfort. And what you can't do is let that discomfort make you an unlikable person, an ugly
become
person,
a victim.
harsh, reactive victim.
Right.
So that's not helpful either.
Right.
Then you're more of an outsider because of that. So you have to just temper that, talk to it. It's not the biological parents. It's not in their power to fix all of that for you. Some of it you have to work on internally.
Right.
And they can do the things like trying to draw you in to the
Mhm.
family over time.
Yeah, and I do want to say to those who are experiencing that, I felt that as an outsider early in our marriage.
Mm.
But the longer you're in the marriage, the longer you're a part of those kids' lives, the faster that it does happen that you don't feel like an outsider. I never feel like an outsider in
Mm.
my family now
Yeah,
with
that's
our
great.
stepkids. So
That's
yeah,
wonderful.
that does happen over time. It's common.
I think we
But
got time for one more.
one more, and I don't see any on the screen, so
Okay.
we'll take another one that came in.
How do you forgive an absentee parent who will never be involved in your child's life?
Ugh,
You know, what I think is so frustrating about that one is forgiveness is hard enough, but forgiveness over and over and over and over again, because
right.
when somebody's MIA, it's an ongoing pain in your child's
Mhm.
life. And every time you see that pain in them, you just feel so angry and frustrated
Right.
towards the person who has gone away. And rightfully so. There's an injustice that's happened here. So this is ultimately about finding it in your heart to say, I'm going to release you of the obligation of anything you owe me for what you've done. And that's
Mhm.
essentially what forgiveness is.
Mhm.
And the way we get there, scripture's, I think, very clear, is you remember how much God has forgiven you. That becomes your impetus to say, you know what? I need to release this for you. If you can't do it today, okay, pray about it. Like we said earlier,
Right.
God, help me move toward forgiving this person.
Mm.
It does not mean forgiveness does not mean trust. I always want to say that,
Oh,
because
right.
sometimes people are afraid to forgive because they think, well, then that just means I have to be nice, or that just means I have to let the kids go back and we don't trust. No, it doesn't mean any of that.
Mhm.
You don't have to become stupid just
Mhm.
because you forgive. You can still have boundaries. You can still, deal with reality as it is.
Right.
You're just letting go of the offense and holding that against them.
Yeah, and also recognizing as long as you hold on to that unforgiveness, how it is affecting you. I've talked
Mhm.
about this a little bit with my former
Mhm.
spouse. I held on to unforgiveness, and it's a poison,
Mm.
and it can affect every relationship, but especially our relationship with the Lord. So, do we want to walk out of sync with that because we are choosing to not forgive?
Yeah.
It's not a good place to be.
It's been great to have you with us. Some questions, we still didn't get them all. We're
Right.
going to keep trying to answer these over time. Hey, share this with a friend when it's all said and done. Post, share, let other people see it. You've got a Women in Blended
I
Families.
do. So the second Tuesday of every month, Women of Blended Families live stream happens. And this September the 12th, we're going to have Dr. Dalton Smith. She has written a book on sacred rest. It is so good about
Mhm.
we live such busy lives. So where do we find rest, emotional rest, social rest, all those kinds of rest that we need in the midst of busyness?
Sounds great.
Yeah. So
Be a
join
good
us for that.
conversation.
Yes, I'm looking forward to
Our
it.
Summit on Step Family Ministry is coming up in October. That is virtual. And no, you don't have to be a pastor on staff to attend that.
Mm,
Lay couples are welcome and invited, but tell your staff about it. We'd love for them to join us so that they can be part of it. There's a QR code on the screen. Just take a quick shot of that with your phone. It'll get you all to the right place. SummitOnStepFamilies.com is the website. We're going to help people this year think about how they can be step family aware,
right.
simply mindful of step families in their church, and how they can integrate simple little principles of ministry into all areas of ministry, such as children and student programs, adult ed programs, preaching, teaching programs, small groups. We'll let you just sort of figure out where you can layer in opportunities to minister to blended families.
Right. It's going to be good.
It's going to be good. Well, listen, it's been wonderful to have you with us. We appreciate you joining us. May God be with you. Take care.
Bye.